Cornered, debt-ridden, her sister's life hanging by a thread, Alara's freedom vanished. A silent, dark figure materialized. "She's with me," he declared. Not salvation, but a ruthless claim. Kaido Kageyama, the enigmatic mafia boss, bought her world with one gold coin. Safe now, but wholly owned. What will this powerful protector demand? The air in the Obsidian Club was always thick, a cloying blend of expensive cigar smoke, aged whiskey, and the clatter of hushed, self-important conversations. Tonight, it felt heavier, pressing down on Alara's lungs like a physical weight. Her shift was dragging, each clink of ice against glass a tiny hammer blow against her already throbbing temples. The club, a haven of dark wood, gleaming brass, and velvet so deep it seemed to swallow the light, mocked her with its effortless opulence. Every polished surface reflected not her weary face, but the glittering facade she served, a world away from her own. Her hands, usually deft and steady, trembled slightly as she wiped down the mahogany bar. Years ago, these hands had held charcoal and brushes, sketching dreams onto canvases, bringing vibrant life to forgotten corners of the city. Now they served drinks, mixed cocktails, and wiped away the sticky residue of forgotten desires. The irony was a bitter swallow. Her art, her passion, lay buried under an avalanche of inherited debt, a crushing burden that had stolen her youth and painted her future in shades of relentless gray. She was suffocating. The thought, a silent scream, echoed in the cavernous space of her mind. Every dollar earned, every late night endured, barely chipped away at the monstrous sum. Her parents, gone too soon, had left behind not a legacy, but a financial abyss, a gaping maw that threatened to devour everything she held dear. And at the mouth of that abyss stood Marcus Thorne. The memory of Thorne's smile, thin and sharp as a razor, sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. He wasn't just a club patron, he was the wolf at her door, the man who held the lien on their small, crumbling family home. Thorne, her ex-fiancé, a cruel joke her desperate parents had nearly forced upon her to solve their financial woes. He now wielded their debt like a weapon, each subtle glance, each lingering touch a reminder of her precarious position. He moved through the club with an air of entitled ownership, his expensive cologne, a mix of sandalwood and something subtly predatory, always reaching her before he did. She often felt his eyes on her, a cold, calculating weight that made her skin crawl. He wasn't looking at a bartender. He was looking at a possession, a trapped bird he was slowly, meticulously cornering. Alara. His voice, smooth as aged bourbon, cut through the low hum of the club. She didn't need to turn to know he was there. Leaning against the bar a few feet away, his presence a palpable threat. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled. Her heart, a weary drum, picked up an anxious rhythm. She forced a professional smile, her hands tightening imperceptibly on the bar rag. Mr. Thorne. Another gin and tonic. He chuckled, a low, unsettling sound. Always so efficient, Alara. Such a valuable asset. His gaze lingered on her, then dropped to her worn apron, a silent commentary on her station. You look tired. Still burning the candle at both ends for that little sister of yours. The casual mention of Lily, her innocent, bright-eyed sister, was a deliberate stab. Lily, her sole reason for fighting, her anchor in this turbulent sea of despair. Lily, who deserved a future free from this crushing weight, a future Alara was sacrificing everything to build. Her resolve, usually a quiet ember, flared into a hot, protective fire. Lily is fine, Mr. Thorne, Alara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her stomach. And I'm perfectly capable of handling my responsibilities. He took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving hers, a smirk playing on his lips. Of course. Responsible to a fault, aren't you? It's commendable. Though one might say it's also a weakness. Easily exploited. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, potent and toxic. Those debts, Alara, they don't just disappear. They grow. And I'm a patient man, but even my patience has its limits. Especially when it comes to things I desire. The unspoken threat hung between them, a suffocating presence. He wasn't talking about the money. He was talking about her. He wanted to break her, to force her into a corner where she had no choice but to bend to his will. She imagined his clammy hands on her, his possessive gaze, and a wave of nausea washed over her. She gripped the counter, knuckles white, forcing herself to maintain eye contact. No, not Lily. Never Lily. Her artistic dreams had withered, but her resolve to shield her sister from this darkness was absolute. It was the only masterpiece she had left to create. He finished his drink, the clink of ice cubes against glass echoing ominously in the almost empty club. Think about it, Alara. My offer still stands. A comfortable life. For you. For Lily. His voice dropped, a chilling whisper. Or a much less comfortable one. One where I might just decide to collect what's owed in other ways. And those ways, my dear, involve far less choice for you. He set the empty glass down with a soft thud, the sound reverberating through her bones. His departure was a slow, deliberate act, his shadow stretching long and distorted across the polished floor, a silent promise of encroaching darkness. Alara watched him go, every muscle in her body tensed, her breath catching in her throat. The club, which had only moments ago felt like a gilded prison, now felt like a death trap. She was alone again, the silence deafening, punctuated only by the frantic beat of her own heart. The weight of her despair was immense, a heavy shroud. But beneath it, a tiny, defiant spark flickered. She wouldn't break. She couldn't. For Lily. Just then, a faint glint caught her eye. At the far end of the bar, in a secluded, shadowed booth often occupied by the club's most private clientele, sat a man. He hadn't moved during her interaction with Thorne, blending so seamlessly with the opulent darkness that she hadn't noticed him until now. His posture was impossibly still, his gaze, even from this distance, felt like a physical touch. He was watching her, and in his eyes there was something unreadable, something dangerous, a silent intensity that sent a fresh wave of unease and a curious jolt of anticipation through her exhausted body. The lingering scent of Thorne's cologne was a noxious cloud, swirling around Alara even after he'd vanished into the dimly lit recesses of the club. Her breath hitched, each inhale a shallow, painful gasp. The man in the shadowy booth, however, remained. He hadn't moved, not a muscle, a statue carved from the very darkness he inhabited. His stillness was unnerving, an anomaly in a world of constant motion. Alara felt a strange, magnetic pull, a contradictory urge to both flee and stare. Who was he, this silent observer? And why did his presence, even from a distance, feel like both a shield and a new, unknown threat? Just as she was about to dismiss him as an insignificant detail, a forgotten ghost of the night, a new shadow loomed over her. Marcus Thorne. He was back, his face no longer masked by urbane charm, but twisted into a snarl of possessive fury. He must have seen her watching the stranger, or perhaps her defiance had simply ignited a deeper, uglier temper. He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that scraped against her raw nerves. Oh, but she's precisely in this, my dear. A charming little pawn, wouldn't you agree? Perhaps a bit too fragile for the city's rough edges. A girl alone in that neighborhood. So many things could happen. His eyes gleamed with a chilling satisfaction, delighting in her palpable terror. A simple accident. A wrong turn. Who would even know? Her stomach churned, a knot of pure dread coiling tighter and tighter. Every nightmare she'd ever had about failing to protect Lily, about Thorne reaching for her sister, materialized with brutal clarity. He wasn't just threatening her. He was ripping away the last vestiges of her strength, her very reason for enduring. She felt utterly, terrifyingly helpless. The glittering club, usually a facade of safety, now felt like a stage for her personal horror. Just as the despair threatened to swallow her whole, a new, imposing presence materialized at the bar. It wasn't a casual approach. It was an emergence, a deliberate crossing of the threshold from shadow to light. Kaido Kageyama, the man from the secluded booth, stood beside Alara. He was taller than she'd realized, his frame radiating an almost predatory stillness. His tailored dark suit seemed to absorb the ambient light, making him appear even more formidable. His hair, dark as midnight, framed a face sculpted with sharp, elegant lines. But it was his eyes that truly captivated her, eyes the color of obsidian, deep and ancient, that held an unsettling intensity. Marcus Thorne, for all his bluster, visibly recoiled, a flicker of genuine fear crossing his face before he could mask it. Kaido didn't look at Thorne. His gaze, dark and unyielding, fixed solely on Alara. It was a possessive look, a claim staked in the most public of ways. Then his hand, strong and surprisingly warm, gently brushed her arm, guiding her imperceptibly behind his formidable frame. The simple touch of fleeting connection sent a jolt through her, a mix of terror and an utterly unexpected surge of relief. She's with me. Kaido's voice was a low, dangerous rumble, edged with a command that left no room for argument. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of irrefutable fact, delivered with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Every syllable seemed to carry the weight of untold power. "Do you have a problem with that, Thorn?" Marcus, for the first time, seemed truly flustered. His face, normally a canvas of controlled sneers, twisted with a mixture of impotent rage and dawning apprehension. He opened his mouth, then closed it, sputtering for words that wouldn't come. Kaido didn't wait. His obsidian eyes still locked on Alara for a fraction of a second, then flicked to Thorn, holding him in a silent, chilling stare that promised swift, severe consequences. It was a dismissal, absolute and humiliating. "Get out," Kaido murmured, the word barely audible above the club's ambient hum, yet it resonated with an undeniable force. Thorn, defeated and visibly seething, finally backed away, throwing a venomous glare at both Alara and Kaido before retreating into the night. Alara watched him go, a shaky breath escaping her lips. The immediate, suffocating fear for Lily receded, replaced by a dizzying mixture of shock, awe, and a profound, terrifying gratitude. Kaido turned to her, his expression still unreadable. He reached into his suit jacket, not for a weapon, but for something else. With a deliberate, almost ceremonial gesture, he placed a single heavy object on the polished mahogany bar. It was a gold coin, ancient and intricately etched, catching the dim light with an almost mythical gleam. It wasn't payment for a drink. It was a silent, powerful declaration. A contract. A claim. His gaze returned to hers, piercing and intense. There was no warmth, no sympathy, only a dark, calculating assessment. But beneath the coldness, Alara sensed something else, a fierce, uncompromising will. He had saved her, yes, but at what cost? She was no longer just a struggling bartender with insurmountable debts. She was now, undeniably, inexplicably, his. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had traded one cage for another, perhaps even more opulent, more dangerous. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was safe for now. Lily was safe. But this man, Kaido Kageyama, with his silent power and his possessive gaze, had just stepped into her life, not as a savior, but as a silent, formidable force. What would he demand in return for this fatal claim? The future, once a terrifying blank slate, now felt ominously inscribed with his name. The days that followed Kaido Kageyama's unexpected intervention were a dizzying blur of escalating tension and a chilling sense of inevitability. Marcus Thorn, true to his venomous nature, unleashed a calculated campaign of retaliation. Alara found her shifts at the Obsidian Club mysteriously cut, her schedule decimated, leaving gaping holes in her already meager income. Whispers, laced with insidious lies, followed her, painting her as unreliable, unstable, even a thief. Her carefully cultivated reputation, fragile as it was, began to fray at the edges. Each snippy remark from a colleague, each suspicious glance from a manager, was a tiny cut designed to bleed her dry. The fear, a constant, dull ache in her chest, intensified. She was being systematically dismantled, her livelihood choked off, her independence chipped away piece by agonizing piece. But the true terror didn't strike until a Tuesday evening, a week after the incident at the bar. Alara received a frantic, tearful call from Lily. Her sister, usually so resilient, was sobbing uncontrollably. "I almost got hit, Alara. A car. It just swerved. Right at me. It felt like it was on purpose." The receiver trembled in Alara's hand. Lily had been walking home from her part-time job, a route she took every day. A simple accident, as Thorn had so casually threatened. The cold, calculated malice of it ripped through Alara, leaving her breathless with rage and a deeper, more primal fear. Thorn wasn't just playing games with her life, he was playing with Lily's. That night, Alara paced her tiny, cramped apartment, the walls seeming to close in on her. The lingering scent of cheap detergent and stale coffee that clung to her clothes felt like a tangible representation of her poverty. She was out of options. Every avenue she'd explored, desperate loan applications, selling her last remaining trinkets, had led to a dead end, subtly blocked by Thorn's insidious reach. Her fierce independence, once her shield, now felt like a foolish, self-destructive pride. Lily's trembling voice on the phone echoed in her ears, a constant, heartbreaking refrain. She couldn't protect Lily from this alone. She simply couldn't. Her phone, usually a source of mundane texts, vibrated with an unfamiliar number. She stared at it, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Hesitantly, she answered. Elara. The voice was Kaido Kageyama's, low and resonant, cutting through the static of her fear. Your sister's incident tonight was not an accident. Thorn is escalating. A gasp escaped her lips. He knew. He knew everything. The realization was both terrifying and strangely reassuring. He had eyes and ears everywhere. I can't. Elara stammered, her voice hoarse. I can't let him hurt her, Kaido. You won't have to, he replied, his tone devoid of emotion, purely logical. My offer of protection still stands, but it is not a casual arrangement. It requires your full compliance. You and your sister will move into my residence. Immediately, her mind reeled. Move in with him, the man who had staked a silent, possessive claim on her at the bar. The thought sent a jolt of both fear and desperate hope through her. It was a gilded cage, she knew. A trade. Her freedom for Lily's safety. But what choice did she have? The image of Lily's terrified face, the near miss, solidified her decision. What are the terms? She asked, her voice barely a whisper, the last vestiges of her pride burning away like ash. Simple, Kaido stated, his voice as sharp and clear as crystal. You and your sister will be safe. Thorn will no longer be a threat to either of you. In return, you will reside in my home. You will not leave without my escort or explicit permission. Your communication will be monitored for your security. Your financial burdens will be handled. Lily's education will be secured. You will not question my methods. You will simply exist under my protection. Each word was a handcuff, binding her tighter, yet each also promised an impenetrable shield around Lily. It was a cold, transactional deal, devoid of sentiment, yet offering exactly what she needed. Sacrifice. It was her only option. Agreed, Elara said, the word feeling heavy on her tongue, sealing her fate. Within hours, a sleek black SUV pulled up to her dilapidated apartment building. Two silent, imposing men, Kaido's security, efficiently packed her few belongings in Lily's, treating them with a surprising gentleness. Lily, confused and frightened, clung to Elara's hand. Elara murmured reassurances, her own heart a terrified bird trapped in her ribs. The drive was short but transformative. They ascended into the gleaming spires of the city, the urban sprawl receding into a glittering carpet below. The penthouse Kaido Kageyama called home was breathtaking. Walls of glass offered panoramic views of the illuminated metropolis, a stark contrast to her cramped, shadowed existence. It was a symphony of minimalist design, cool marble, dark wood, and muted, expensive fabrics. Immaculate, best, and utterly impersonal. Kaido was waiting for them. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a silhouette against the city lights, his presence commanding the enormous space. He didn't offer a welcoming smile, only a brief, assessing glance. Lily will have her own room, adjoining yours, with a private tutor arranged, Kaido stated, addressing Elara directly, his gaze firm. Your needs will be met. Any requests go through my staff. You will not attempt to contact Thorn. You will not leave this penthouse without a member of my security detail. Understand. Elara swallowed hard, her eyes darting around the cavernous, luxurious space. It was indeed a gilded cage. Beautiful, utterly secure, but still a prison. The air, though pure and clean, felt thin, controlled. She was safe, yes, but at what price? Lily, wide-eyed and awestruck by the sheer luxury, looked at Elara, then back at Kaido, a tiny tentative hand reaching for her sister. Elara squeezed Lily's hand, a silent promise. This is for you. We will be safe. I understand. Elara finally managed, her voice a ghost of its former strength. The words felt like a surrender, a forfeiture of her very self. She was no longer just Elara, the aspiring artist, the struggling bartender. She was now under Kaido Kageyama's protection, a pawn in his dangerous, opulent game. The weight of his power settled around her, a suffocating blanket of safety. She was trapped, undeniably, but for the first time in weeks, Lily was truly out of reach of Marcus Thorn. That, she decided, was enough. For now, the first few days in Kaido Kageyama's penthouse were a disorienting haze for Elara. The sheer scale of the place, its austere beauty, felt less like a home and more like a high-end museum she wasn't supposed to touch. Every morning, she woke to the muted hum of the city far below, the sprawling urban landscape a dizzying tapestry beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Lily, bless her resilient spirit, quickly adapted, mesmerized by the private cinema room and the endless array of untouched books in a magnificent library. For Alara, however, it was a constant struggle for equilibrium. She felt like a ghost, drifting through polished marble halls, her old life a fading echo. Kaido's staff, efficient and silent as shadows, catered to their every need, yet their professionalism created an invisible barrier. Meals appeared as if by magic, served in a dining room large enough for 20, though it was usually just Alara and Lily. Kaido himself was a fleeting presence, often gone before dawn, returning late, a man consumed by an empire Alara could only guess at. Her fierce independence chafed under the unspoken rules. She tried to offer help, to clear dishes, to make her bed, only to be met with polite but firm refusals. Mr. Kageyama prefers everything to be handled by the household staff, Miss Alara. Each time, she felt her cheeks flush with a mix of frustration and embarrassment. She was a guest, a ward, but not an equal. The gilded cage, and one afternoon, she stumbled upon a room she hadn't noticed before, a large, sun-drenched space with an easel, a pristine set of oil paints, and a stack of blank canvases. Her breath caught. For months, years, her art supplies had been relegated to a dusty box under her bed. Here they were laid out, inviting and ready. There was no note, no explanation, just the silent offering. A subtle moment of Kaido's care, a quiet acknowledgement of her lost dreams. A warmth, both unsettling and deeply comforting, bloomed in her chest. Later that week, she overheard a hushed conversation between two security guards. Lily had been approached by a tutor who had asked too many questions about their past life. Kaido had been informed. Mr. Kageyama personally handled it, one guard murmured. The tutor was reassigned. He doesn't tolerate any intrusion into Miss Lily's privacy. A surge of fierce gratitude mixed with a renewed sense of unease. He was protecting them, meticulously, ruthlessly. But at what cost to those who crossed his invisible lines? Observing Kaido himself was like watching a perfectly honed machine. When he was present, usually late at night, in his vast home office, she'd sometimes catch glimpses of him. He moved with a quiet, lethal grace, his mind always several steps ahead. He spoke in clipped, precise sentences, his commands executed without question. She saw him on video calls, his face a mask of cold calculation, his decisions swift and unforgiving. He was utterly ruthless, a force of nature in a bespoke suit. It was terrifying. And yet, there was an undeniable magnetism to it, a dark power that both repelled and fascinated her. One evening, unable to sleep, Alara wandered into the living area, drawn by the faint glow of the city lights. Kaido was there, not working, but standing by the window, a single glass of amber liquid in his hand. His back was to her, his posture rigid, silhouetted against the glittering panorama. He seemed smaller somehow in that immense space. Lonelier. It was a fleeting glimpse, a crack in the formidable facade. He wasn't just a powerful magnate. He was a man alone in his fortress. Can't sleep. His voice, quiet and surprisingly gentle, startled her. He hadn't turned. No, Alara admitted, her voice softer than she intended. Too much quiet. He finally turned, his obsidian eyes meeting hers. There was a tiredness in them she hadn't noticed before, a deep-seated weariness that softened the hard edges of his face. The city takes some getting used to, especially from this height. It's beautiful, she said, looking out at the endless lights, but it also feels isolating. He nodded slowly. It can be. He paused, taking a sip of his drink. The art supplies. Do you like them? The directness of his question surprised her. Yes. Thank you. They're more than I could have imagined. A blush crept up her neck. Good, he said, and for the briefest moment, a flicker of something almost akin to satisfaction crossed his stoic features. It is important to have purpose, beyond mere survival. His words resonated deeply. He understood, in his own cold way, the essence of her struggle. The shared understanding, unspoken and profound, created a fragile bridge between them. She felt a warmth spread through her veins, a reluctant attraction coiling in her stomach. It was dangerous, she knew. He was dangerous. But in his dangerous world, she was finally safe. And in that safety, in that controlled proximity, a different kind of fire was beginning to stir. The silence that settled between them was no longer oppressive but charged, humming with unspoken thoughts and burgeoning awareness. Kaido, the ruthless magnate, and Alara, the rescued artist, stood on a precipice of something new, something intoxicating and terrifying. She wondered what else he might notice about her, what other parts of her soul he might silently tend to. And she wondered, with a tremor of fear and anticipation, how much longer she could resist the unsettling pull of his dark, complex world. The fragile truce Alara had found in Kaido's penthouse was abruptly shattered one crisp autumn evening. The call came from the Obsidian Club, frantic and hushed, relayed by one of Kaido's security detail to Alara, who was in the penthouse living room, sketching absently. Mr. Kageyama's presence is requested immediately. There's an issue with the club's high rollers. The urgency in the guard's voice was unmistakable. Kaido, who had been reviewing documents in his study, emerged with a posture of coiled readiness. His obsidian eyes, usually impassive, now held a glint of steel. "Stay here," he ordered Alara, his voice a low command. "Do not leave this building. The perimeter is secure." Despite his instruction, a prickle of unease, then a surge of fierce, protective curiosity, propelled Alara to ask, "What's happening?" Kaido paused, his gaze assessing. "Thorn is attempting to destabilize a key part of my operations at the club. A subtle poison, spread through disinformation and subtle financial manipulation targeting specific, influential clients. He seeks to undermine trust, to erode my reputation." His explanation was concise, devoid of emotion, yet the underlying current of danger was palpable. Can I come?" The words were out before she could second-guess them. "I know the club. I know the patrons. I might see something your men wouldn't." The audacity of her request hung in the air, audacious and perhaps foolish. But a part of her, the old defiant Alara, refused to be a passive prisoner. Kaido studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a curt nod that surprised even her, he said, "Very well. But you stay behind me. You speak only when spoken to. You observe. And you do exactly as I instruct." "Understood. Understood," Alara replied, a thrill of nervous energy mixing with determination. The ride to the Obsidian Club was silent, tense. The city lights blurred into streaks of color outside the tinted windows. Inside the club, the usual hum of conversation had morphed into a discordant buzz of agitated murmurs. The air was thick with unease. Groups of impeccably dressed men stood in hushed, suspicious clusters, their faces etched with concern. Alara recognized several of them, powerful figures in finance and real estate, men whose trust was invaluable. Kaido moved through the club with an almost spectral grace, his presence instantly commanding attention. Heads turned, whispers died, and a path seemed to clear before him. He exuded an aura of calm, lethal authority. Alara, trailing slightly behind him as instructed, felt a strange mix of fear and admiration. This was his element, his kingdom. She quickly noticed the source of the disruption. Several influential patrons were gathered around a sleek, digital display screen typically used for promotional videos. Now it displayed not the club's usual elegant imagery, but a scrolling ticker of news headlines, fabricated articles hinting at Kaido's questionable partnerships, dubious investments, and even potential legal entanglements that would put his clients' assets at risk. It was a sophisticated, insidious attack designed to sow panic and erode confidence. Kaido approached the screen, his face a mask of stone. He listened for a moment to the agitated murmurs of the patrons, his gaze sweeping over the fabricated headlines. Then, with a quiet, decisive move, he reached for a panel on the wall, ignored by everyone else in their panic. His fingers, long and elegant, danced over a hidden keypad Alara hadn't known existed. The screen flickered, then went blank. A tense silence fell over the club. Kaido didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice low, yet it carried an unmistakable weight that silenced the remaining whispers. "I understand there has been some misinformation disseminated tonight." His gaze, sharp as a blade, swept over the faces of the patrons. "Let me assure you, any attempts to undermine the integrity of the Obsidian Club, or any entity under my protection, will be met with immediate and decisive consequences." He then nodded to one of his men, who quickly moved to his side office. Moments later, the club's main screen sprang to life, displaying live, real-time financial statements, impeccably audited records, and secure communication logs that unequivocally debunked every single fabricated headline. The data was overwhelming, irrefutable. It was a masterclass in swift, surgical damage control. But Kaido wasn't finished. His eyes, cold and unwavering, found a figure lurking near the bar, a known associate of Thorne's, a man who dealt in gossip and low-level schemes. Kaido simply nodded. One of his security guards moved with terrifying speed, seizing the man. There was no struggle, no argument, just a silent, efficient removal. Then Kaido turned his attention back to the crowd. As for the source of this information, his voice was laced with a chilling calm. Let it be known that anyone found complicit in such malicious actions will face not only legal repercussions, but also the permanent forfeiture of all privileges within any establishment associated with Kageyama Holdings. Their assets will be frozen. Their networks severed. It was a death knell, delivered with quiet, unyielding authority. No grand gestures, no raised voice, just the stark, brutal truth of his power. Alara watched, mesmerized and terrified. She saw the relief, then the dawning fear, on the faces of the influential patrons. They weren't just reassured, they were reminded, with brutal clarity, of Kaido's absolute control. Her own fear of him intensified, a cold knot in her stomach, but was now laced with an undeniable, grudging admiration. He was terrifying. He was dangerous. But he was also devastatingly effective. As the club slowly returned to its uneasy calm, Alara met Kaido's gaze across the room. There was a knowing flicker in his obsidian eyes, acknowledging her presence, her observation. He had given her a glimpse behind the curtain, a taste of his true world. And in that moment, she realized the extent of his protective capabilities. He was a force, an unyielding wall against any who dared threaten what he claimed. He had saved her and Lily from Thorne's physical threats. Now he was showing her he could obliterate his enemies entirely. The feeling of security within Kaido's sphere deepened, but so did the realization of the immense danger that came with existing in his world. She was safe, yes, but she was now inextricably linked to a man whose power was absolute, whose justice was swift, and whose enemies faced a reckoning far more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. She shivered, a thrilling chill running down her spine. The serpent had warned, and Kaido had answered with the silent, deadly promise of a lion. The aftermath of Kaido's decisive intervention at the Obsidian Club left Alara shaken, but also surprisingly grounded. The air in the penthouse, once sterile and remote, now held a different quality. She had seen Kaido's true colors, ruthless, formidable, utterly merciless to his enemies, and instead of fleeing, she felt a strange, unsettling pull of understanding. The fear was still there, a low thrum beneath her skin, but was now interwoven with a burgeoning trust, a reluctant admiration for the sheer, unyielding force of his protection. He didn't just fend off threats, he obliterated them. A few evenings after the incident, Alara found herself in the expansive living room, sketching in one of the new notebooks Kaido had silently provided. Lily was asleep, a peaceful sight that still eased the knots in Alara's stomach. The city lights glittered outside, a silent, beautiful backdrop. The heavy scent of rain-soaked earth and ozone drifted in from the balcony, a fresh contrast to the usual polished air of the penthouse. Kaido entered, his presence quiet, almost unnervingly so. He moved to the sleek, minimalist bar, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. His movements were fluid, canonical, a testament to the disciplined power she had witnessed. He didn't speak, but his presence filled the vast space, no longer menacing, but simply present. "You handled it," Alara said, her voice soft, breaking the comfortable silence. "Thorne. The headlines. All of it." Kaido took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes dark as polished stone, meeting hers across the room. "Inefficiency is a luxury I cannot afford, especially when it threatens what I protect." His gaze lingered on her, then shifted to the sketch pad in her hands. "You found the art supplies." "Yes," she confessed, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. "Thank you. It means a lot." He nodded once. "Purpose. It is the only thing that distinguishes us from the broken." His voice was low, almost a murmur, carrying a hint of something Alara couldn't quite place, a deep, almost ancient weariness. "I understand what it is to have one's passion stripped away, to have it buried under the weight of obligation." Alara froze, her charcoal still. His words struck a chord so profound, so unexpected, that she felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crack. He understood. This man, with his unimaginable power and unreadable eyes, understood the crushing weight of deferred dreams. My parents, Alara began, her voice barely a whisper, the words spilling out before she could censor them. They weren't malicious, just desperate. They made bad choices, gambled on a dream that turned into a nightmare. The debt, it wasn't just money. It was their legacy, and it became mine to bear. It felt like I was drowning in their failures. My art, my only escape, felt like a selfish indulgence I couldn't afford. She paused, surprised by her own candor. She hadn't spoken about this to anyone, not even Lily, not with such raw honesty. Kaido listened, his expression softening almost imperceptibly, the lines around his eyes deepening as if in silent recognition. He walked slowly, deliberately, towards the expansive windows, his back to her once more. My father was a man of ambition, he said, his voice now lower, rougher around the edges, as if speaking a forgotten language. He believed power was the only currency. He built his empire on less than legitimate means, a labyrinth of shadows and whispered promises. Alara held her breath, sensing the profound vulnerability beneath his controlled tone. He was revealing something deeply personal, a chink in his impenetrable armor. I watched him, Kaido continued, his voice almost a lament. I watched him lose himself to it, to the endless hunger for more. He believed he was building security, a legacy for his family. But all he built was a cage of his own making. A name whispered with fear, not respect. He turned then, his obsidian eyes holding a flicker of deep ancient pain. When he died, I inherited that cage, that name, that expectation. I spent years trying to dismantle it, to make it honorable, to use the power for purpose, not just control. He looked at her, truly looked, and Alara felt the raw depth of his burden. I built this empire not just to survive, but to clean a legacy, to find a different kind of strength. One that doesn't just destroy, but also protects. His words resonated with an agonizing familiarity. Alara saw not just a ruthless magnate, but a man burdened by the ghosts of his past, striving to redefine himself against a formidable inheritance. His empire, she realized, wasn't just about power. It was about redemption. That's why you understand, Alara whispered, the charcoal clattering softly to the floor. Why you understood about my art. About purpose. He nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible curve to his lips. We carry our scars differently, Alara, but we carry them all the same. He walked over to her, his movements slow and deliberate, and sat on the edge of the sofa opposite her, his whiskey forgotten. The distance between them, physical and emotional, had dramatically shrunk. He reached out, his finger gently tracing the faint, almost invisible lines of charcoal dust on her hand. The touch was light, feather-soft, sending a jolt of pure, unadulterated intimacy through her. It was non-sexual, yet profoundly moving, a silent acknowledgement of their shared burdens, their shared understanding. Your art, he said, his voice a low murmur, his eyes focused intently on her hand. You should not let it die. It is a part of who you are, the part that fights against the darkness. Tears pricked Alara's eyes, hot and unexpected. She hadn't cried over her art in years, had thought the well of sorrow had dried up. But hearing him, this dangerous, powerful man, acknowledge her deepest self, it broke something open within her. He saw her, truly saw her. Not just the bartender, not just the debt-ridden girl, but Alara, the artist, the dreamer. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the opulence that had once felt so suffocating, Alara felt a profound sense of connection, a strange, beautiful intimacy. They were two broken souls, burdened by inherited legacies, finding an unexpected common ground. The air crackled with a new kind of tension, a potent mixture of empathy, understanding, and a deepening affection that was both terrifying and utterly captivating. She felt a profound sense of trust blooming in her chest, a trust she never imagined she could feel for a man like Kaido Kageyama. And as his gaze met hers, clear and unwavering, she knew, with a certainty that thrilled and frightened her, that their story was only just beginning. The illusion of impregnable safety shattered on a Thursday night that began like any other. Lily was deep in her studies in her bedroom, a gentle hum of classical music drifting from beneath her door. Alara, seeking solace in her art, was in the sun-drenched studio, losing herself in a vibrant canvas, the scent of fresh oil paint a welcome balm to her soul. She had grown accustomed to the quiet hum of the penthouse, the almost imperceptible presence of Kaido's security detail, the reassuring knowledge that a world of concrete and glass lay between them and Thorn's malice. A dangerous, fragile peace had settled. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, and plunged the entire penthouse into an inky blackness. A gasp caught in Alara's throat. The silence that followed was heavy, disorienting. Emergency lights, faint and amber, immediately clicked on, casting long, eerie shadows that danced like specters across the polished floors. This wasn't a city-wide blackout. The cityscape beyond the windows still blazed with a million distant stars. This was localized, intentional. A chill, colder than the sudden lack of air conditioning, seeped into her bones. Lily, Alara's voice, raw with sudden panic, echoed in the sudden gloom. She fumbled for her phone, but there was no signal. Dead. Just like the security monitors she could vaguely make out on a distant wall, their screens dark. She rushed towards Lily's room, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The quiet efficiency of Kaido's protection had lulled her into a false sense of absolute security, and now that sense was violently ripped away. The metallic tang of fear filled her mouth. As she neared Lily's door, a faint creak from the main entrance of the penthouse, an area she knew was typically under constant surveillance, sent a fresh wave of terror through her. "Lily, stay in your room," Alara shouted, her voice thick with dread. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Too many. Not Kaido's men. Her instincts, honed by a lifetime of struggle, screamed danger. She spun, looking for anything. A heavy vase, a sculpture, anything to wield. Two dark figures emerged from the gloom, their faces obscured by ski masks. They moved with a practiced, brutal efficiency, flanking her before she could react. A hand, gloved and powerful, clamped over her mouth, stifling her scream. Another arm snaked around her waist, lifting her off her feet. The smell of stale cigarette smoke and cheap disinfectant filled her nostrils, a stark contrast to the refined air of the penthouse. She struggled, a wild, desperate fury surging through her. She kicked, bit, clawed, but their grip was unyielding. Her art, her fragile dreams, Lily's safety, they were all suddenly meaningless against this raw, visceral fight for survival. She saw Lily's door, still closed, and a fresh wave of despair washed over her. "Keep her safe, Kaido. Please." The thought was a silent prayer. They moved quickly, dragging her through the darkened corridors, past the silent, dead security panels. The hum of an elevator, usually so smooth, felt unnaturally loud. They shoved her inside, the metallic clang of the doors echoing her defeat. The descent was agonizingly slow, each floor taking her further from the only safe haven she had known. When the doors finally hissed open, she was met not with the familiar elegance of the lobby, but a cold, damp underground garage, its concrete walls slick with condensation. A black, unmarked van idled, its engine rumbling impatiently. They threw her into the back, the smell of exhaust fumes and stale fear choking her. A hood was roughly pulled over her head, plunging her world into absolute darkness. The last sound she registered before the van roared to life was the sickening thud of the penthouse service doors slamming shut, sealing her fate. Hours later, though she couldn't tell time in the oppressive darkness, Alara was shivering violently. The hood had been removed, but her eyes struggled to adjust to the dim, flickering bulb overhead. She was in a barren, desolate room. Concrete floor, peeling paint, a single rusted pipe dripping somewhere in the distance. The air was thick with the stench of damp earth, mildew, and something acrid metallic like old blood. Her shoulder ached where she'd been roughly handled. Her wrists, bound with rough rope, chafed painfully. Utter despair. It was a suffocating blanket, heavy and suffocating. She was isolated, utterly alone. Would Kaido even know she was gone? Would he care? Had he already dismissed her as a burden, a liability? The fleeting intimacy they had shared, the quiet moments of understanding, now felt like a cruel dream, an illusion in the face of this brutal reality. The door creaked open, admitting a sliver of light and the unmistakable, slithering presence of Marcus Thorne. He strode in, his expensive suit pristine amidst the squalor, a chillingly calm smile gracing his lips. He held a small, gleaming device in his hand. "Welcome, Alara," he sneered, his voice dripping with false concern. "Did Kaido miss you already? Or is he too busy counting his losses? What do you want, Marcus?" Alara spat, her voice raspy, but her defiance still burning. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "What I always wanted." You, and to see Kaido Kageyama fall. And you, my dear, are the perfect wedge. He gestured to the device in his hand. While his security systems were conveniently offline, a little trick I picked up, I left a small gift. A video showing you willingly walking out, meeting a contact. A burner phone you conveniently left behind with messages from an old associate discussing your unhappiness with Mr. Kageyama's rules. Quite convincing if I do say so myself. Elera's breath hitched. A fabricated betrayal. He was poisoning Kaido's mind, making her seem complicit, ungrateful. He won't believe you. Oh, he will, Thorn purred, his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. Because his kind always looks for the angles, the betrayals. He'll see a woman accustomed to freedom, chafing under his control. He'll see a hidden agenda. And even if a part of him doubts, the anger, the pride, that will be enough. He will believe you disposable, Elera. A damaged asset. And then you'll be mine again. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, suffocating her. He won't come for you. He will simply cut his losses. The words were a venomous dart, piercing her last shred of hope. Thorn was right. Kaido was a man of logic, of cold calculation. Would he truly risk everything for a woman he suspected of betrayal? The thought was a fresh agony, worse than the cold, worse than the ropes. She was utterly helpless, her fate dangling precariously in Thorn's cruel hands, her future a terrifying blank. Meanwhile, in the silent, darkened penthouse, Kaido Kageyama returned. The absence was immediate, palpable. The familiar hum of his security systems, usually a comforting backdrop, was eerily silent. A cold dread, a feeling he rarely indulged, began to claw at his gut. He strode into the living room, his every sense on high alert. The faint, sweet scent of oil paint from the studio. Lily's closed door untouched. But Elera gone. The studio, her sketchpad abandoned on the easel, half-finished drawing of a vibrant cityscape. No sign of struggle. Too clean. His men swarmed in, their faces grim. All systems compromised, sir. Localized EMP. We're running diagnostics now. It was sophisticated. Kaido's obsidian eyes narrowed, scanning every inch of the vast space. A small, unfamiliar burner phone lay conspicuously on a marble table near the front entrance, just where his internal sensors would have been offline. He picked it up, his thumb brushing against a simulated crack on the screen. A single, planted video. A grainy, distorted image of Elera, her face shadowed, seemingly walking casually with a hooded figure, then messages faked from a supposed old friend, complaining about Kaido's suffocating rules. Rage. Cold, pure, volcanic rage surged through Kaido, a force so potent it made the air around him crackle. It wasn't just anger at Thorn's audacity. It was anguish, a visceral tearing at his carefully guarded control. He had offered protection, a sanctuary. And this was the thanks? A calculated betrayal, a casual walk into the enemy's arms? The logical part of his mind, honed by years of deception, screamed that it was too convenient, too perfectly staged. But the raw, animalistic part, the part that had allowed himself to feel a glimmer of connection, a thread of hope with Elera, felt a profound, searing burn of perceived betrayal. He had opened a door, albeit a guarded one, and she had seemingly walked out. His jaw clenched, muscles rigid. Grief mixed with a furious, dangerous pride. She was his to protect, his to claim. And Thorn, the wretched serpent, had taken her, using her apparent complicity as a weapon. Find her, Kaido snarled, his voice a low, lethal growl that promised unimaginable retribution. Every camera, every contact, every shadow. I want Thorn's every resource, his every man, his every breath. He will pay. And if she truly betrayed me, his voice trailed off, leaving the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. He will still pay for taking what is mine. Now, his eyes, colder and darker than the deepest night, scanned the empty penthouse, the silence now deafening. Elera was gone, and Kaido Kageyama, consumed by a storm of rage, anguish, and a chilling sliver of doubt, would tear the city apart to get her back. The burner phone still clutched in Kaido's hand felt like a burning coal. The planted video, the fabricated messages, a masterclass in manipulation, perfectly crafted to wound him where he was most vulnerable. His carefully constructed logic, his guarded trust. But beneath the cold, analytical layers of his mind, a primal, volcanic fury now simmered, threatening to erupt. It was a rage he rarely allowed himself, a savage force born from the violation of his sanctuary and the audacious claim on what was his. Trace that signal, Kaido barked, his voice a low growl that vibrated with contained violence, addressing his head of security. Every network, every back channel. I want every single contact Thorn has ever made. Every location he owns, rents, or has ever merely stepped into. Now, his command galvanized the penthouse into a hive of lethal efficiency. Men moved with silent purpose, faces grim, understanding the unspoken stakes. Screens flickered to life, maps of the city blooming with glowing points of data. He stood amidst it all, a dark, still epicenter of wrath. His internal world was a maelstrom. The image of Alara, ostensibly walking away, was a bitter poison. But the gut instinct, the savage possessiveness that roared within him, screamed a different truth. She was taken. She was his. And Thorn would suffer. Hours bled into a tense eternity. Alara's art studio, still holding the faint scent of oil paint, felt like a gaping wound in his soul. Lily, oblivious in her guarded room, was a precious, fragile reminder of his failure. The city map on the main screen pulsed, a network of Kaidos finest hunting their prey. Finally, a crisp voice cut through the comms. Boss, we have a ping. Old industrial yard, south side. Abandoned chemical plant. Thorn's shell company acquired it last month. Kaido's eyes, black as polished obsidian, hardened further. He moved, a blur of controlled power, grabbing his tailor jacket. Mobilize. Perimeter lockdown. Silent approach. No heroics. Just retrieval. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a general, orchestrating a silent war. His personal fury was a cold, precise blade. Alara huddled in the desolate room, the cold seeping into her bones, the stench of decay a constant assault on her senses. Thorn had left her for a time, only to return with a chilling grin, parading her betrayal on the burner phone. He's seen it, Alara. You're a protector. You're Kageyama. He thinks you walked out, left him for a better deal. He won't lift a finger. Despair, a heavy, suffocating blanket, threatened to consume her. He was right. Kaido was logical. He valued loyalty. This fabricated evidence, so perfectly crafted, would plant the seed of doubt. She was just a liability. A broken, disposable asset. The thought of Kaido believing her capable of such a thing was a fresh agony, twisting in her gut. Suddenly, a distant tremor. A low, vibrating hum that seemed to rattle the very foundations of the decaying building. Footsteps. Many. Fast, Thorn, who had been enjoying her misery, suddenly straightened, his smirk faltering. His own phone, clutched in his hand, vibrated with a frantic urgency. His eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear finally piercing his smug facade. What is that? He muttered, more to himself than to her. Then a deafening crash split the air, somewhere far off but unmistakably close. Metal screaming, glass shattering. Shouts, sharp and guttural, echoed through the cavernous plant. Alara's heart leaped into her throat. Kaido. He had come. He believed her. Or, at the very least, he was coming for what he considered his. A wave of adrenaline, dizzying and potent, surged through her, chasing away the cold despair. Terror mixed with an immense, breathtaking relief. Thorn snarled, pulling out a small, gleaming pistol. Damn him. He moved too fast. He barked orders into his phone, then turned to Alara, his eyes blazing with a desperate, cornered fury. You're still my leverage, bitch. You're coming with me. He lunged, tearing at the ropes that bound her, his movements frantic. But before he could free her, before he could drag her further into this nightmare, the door to the desolate room exploded inward. Shards of splintered wood flew through the air, followed by a sudden, blinding flash of tactical light. Kaido Kageyama stood framed in the doorway, a figure of dark, implacable fury. He wasn't merely walking. He was storming, a force of nature unleashed. His suit, still impeccably tailored, seemed to ripple with barely contained power. His face was a mask of cold wrath, every line etched with lethal intent. His obsidian eyes, usually so controlled, now burned with an almost terrifying intensity, fixed solely on Alara, then on Thorn. In his hand, a sleek, silenced pistol. Thorn froze, his face draining of color. The sudden, brutal dominance emanating from Kaido was absolute, palpable. Kei Kageyama. Thorn stammered, his voice cracking, the pistol in his hand trembling. Kaido didn't respond with words. He merely raised his weapon. A single, muffled shot. Not at Thorn, but at the light fixture above, plunging the room into near-total darkness again, save for the faint emergency glow from the hallway. It was a power move, a deliberate act of psychological warfare, making Thorn stumble, disoriented. Alara, released from Thorn's frantic grip as he ducked, saw her chance. Her eyes, now accustomed to the gloom, darted around. A loose metal pipe, thick and heavy, lay against the wall. With a surge of desperate strength, she lunged for it, gripping the cold, rough metal. Thorn, recovering from the shock, aimed his pistol wildly in the dark. Stay back, you Yakuza bastard. She's nothing to you. She is mine. Kaido's voice was a low, chilling growl, devoid of mercy, a promise of exquisite pain. It wasn't just a possessive claim. It was a death sentence. In the sudden chaos, Alara saw Kaido move. A blur of dark motion. Thorn fired, the shot echoing dully. But Kaido was already there, a dark phantom, closing the distance with terrifying speed. He didn't just fight, he dominated. He disarmed Thorn with brutal, surgical precision, twisting the pistol from his hand with a sickening crunch of bone. Thorn cried out, a sound of agony and shock. You lay your hands on what is mine, Kaido snarled, his voice guttural, primal. He slammed Thorn against the wall, the sound of impact reverberating through the desolate room. You threaten her sister. You insult my intelligence. You play your petty games in my city. Each word was punctuated by a savage blow, precise and powerful, aimed not to kill, but to inflict maximum, debilitating pain. Thorn's whimpers were pathetic, dissolving into choked gasps. It was brutal justice, raw and unforgiving, and Alara watched, a terrifying awe mixing with her immense relief. Finally, Kaido released Thorn, letting him slump to the floor, a broken, moaning mess. He was still breathing, but his reign of terror was irrevocably over. Kaido's gaze, burning with an almost feral intensity, swept across the darkened room until it found Alara. He moved towards her then, his steps deliberate, unhurried. The faint emergency light caught the sharp angles of his face, the dark intensity of his eyes. He stopped before her, his powerful frame a solid, unyielding presence. He reached out, his gloved fingers surprisingly gentle as they untied the rough ropes from her wrists, chafed and raw. Alara, he murmured, his voice softer now, but still edged with a deep, possessive rumble. He pulled her into his arms, a sudden, fierce embrace that stole her breath. It was a claim, absolute and undeniable. Her body, shaking with adrenaline and residual terror, finally relaxed against his unyielding strength. His scent, a sophisticated mix of cedarwood and something indefinably dangerous, filled her senses, a potent anchor in the chaos. She clung to him, burying her face in his shoulder, inhaling the scent that now signified safety. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, streamed down her cheeks, washing away the fear, the despair, the grime of the desolate room. Kaido, she choked out, her voice muffled. I knew you'd come. I knew. He held her tighter, his hand stroking her hair, a rare gesture of tender possessiveness. You are mine to protect, he whispered fiercely against her temple, the words a vow, a stark reminder of their unspoken contract. And no one takes what is mine. The words sent a thrill through her, a profound sense of belonging she hadn't realized she craved. She was safe, truly safe. But the world they inhabited, the world he commanded, was a brutal, unforgiving place. And she had just witnessed the full, terrifying might of its king. The rescue was over. But the consequences, the reckoning, were only just beginning. The roar of Kaido's lion heart had subsided, but its echoes reverberated through Alara's every cell. The journey back to the penthouse was a blur of motion and raw emotion. She remained in Kaido's arms, his grip a fierce, protective anchor against the swirling chaos of her own mind. The smell of his expensive cologne, mingled with the faint metallic scent of gunpowder, and something uniquely him, was now intrinsically linked to safety, to salvation. She was bruised, shaken, and utterly exhausted, but alive. And miraculously, Lily was safe. That was all that truly mattered. Back in the pristine silence of the penthouse, the contrast was jarring. The gleaming marble, the soft lighting, the hushed efficiency of Kaido's staff. It felt surreal after the squalor and violence of Thorn's hideout. Kaido carried her directly to her bedroom, bypassing the staff who moved like silent, respectful shadows. He laid her gently on the vast, soft bed, his touch surprisingly tender. "Lily is still asleep," he murmured, his voice a low rumble, the edge of fury now replaced by a quiet, watchful concern. She was unharmed. My men secured her room immediately upon the power outage. Relief, so profound it brought fresh tears to her eyes, washed over Alara. "Thank you," she choked out, her voice still hoarse. "Thank you, Kaido, for everything." He didn't respond with words, only a deep, possessive gaze that swept over her, taking in her pallor, the faint bruises already forming on her wrists. He summoned a medic, a woman whose movements were as precise as Kaido's own, who expertly cleaned her scrapes and administered a mild sedative. All the while, Kaido remained a silent, unmoving sentinel by her bedside, his hand never straying far from hers. The sedative wrapped Alara in a soft, hazy blanket, but it couldn't fully numb the aftershocks. She closed her eyes, and the darkness behind her eyelids replayed the violence. Thorn's sneering face, the terrifying roar of Kaido, the brutal, decisive force of his retaliation. He hadn't just rescued her, he had destroyed Thorn. It was a terrifying, beautiful display of power. Dark justice. When she woke hours later, the room was dimly lit, the city lights a distant glitter beyond the windows. Kaido was still there, seated in an armchair, his jacket shed, his sleeves rolled up to reveal muscled forearms. He was on his phone, speaking in low, clipped Japanese, his expression once again a mask of cold efficiency. He was tying up loose ends. He ended the call, his gaze immediately snapping to hers. "How do you feel?" "Sore," Alara admitted, pushing herself up slightly, wincing as her muscles protested. "But a safe." She looked at him, truly looked at the man who had torn through an entire network for her. "What about Thorn?" Kaido's lips thinned, a chillingly calm expression settling on his face. "Thorn's financial assets have been seized. His companies are being investigated for fraud and money laundering. His reputation, in the circles he craved, is ruined. His associates, compromised by his failures, are deserting him. He will lose everything. His freedom, his influence, his name." He paused, his obsidian eyes holding hers. "He will live, but he will wish he hadn't. He will face a justice far more enduring than a swift death." Alara shivered, a complex mixture of revulsion and dark satisfaction twisting in her gut. It was brutal. It was ruthless. It was Kaido. And a part of her, the part that had endured Thorn's predation for so long, felt a profound, chilling sense of rightness. This wasn't the justice of the courts, but the swift, unwavering justice of a man who carved his own rules. "And the fabricated evidence?" she asked, remembering the video of the burner phone. "Erased. Discredited," Kaido stated, a hint of weariness in his tone. "A minor inconvenience. Your loyalty was never truly in question." "Not by me." The last words, spoken with such quiet certainty, brought a fresh wave of emotion. He had seen through the deception. He had trusted his instincts, or perhaps he had simply known her better than she gave him credit for. The relief of being truly seen, truly believed, was overwhelming. "You're not afraid of it, are you?" Alara asked, her voice soft, her gaze searching his face. The violence. The way you handled him." Kaido's eyes held hers, unflinching. "Violence is a tool, Alara. A language some men only understand. It is necessary to protect what is paramount. My father used it for greed. I use it for purpose. For protection." He stood, walking to the foot of her bed, his presence commanding. "Do you all regret my methods?" Alara considered his question, the weight of the past days settling heavily upon her. The terror, the despair, the raw power. It was a world utterly alien to her. But then she thought of Lily's peaceful sleep, of her own renewed sense of safety, of Thorn's sniveling face as Kaido had broken him. "No," she said, surprising herself with the strength and certainty in her voice. I don't. It was brutal, terrifying, but it was necessary. You saved us. You dismantled him. I accept it. I accept you." A subtle shift in Kaido's expression. A flicker of something akin to profound relief, perhaps even vulnerability, softened the hard lines of his face. His gaze deepened, holding hers in a silent, powerful bond. He hadn't just protected her, he had offered her a glimpse into the depths of his world, and she had chosen to stay. In that acceptance, in that quiet affirmation, a new kind of foundation was laid between them, forged in the crucible of shared danger and dark justice. The aftershock still hummed, but the ground beneath her felt solid, held by the unyielding strength of Kaido Kageyama. Months melted into a year, then more, each day a testament to the unwritten legacy Kaido and Alara were meticulously crafting. The penthouse, once a gilded cage, had transformed into a true home warm with the scent of Alara's oil paints and Lily's laughter. Lily, thriving in her new, secure environment, was enrolled in a prestigious art school, her talent blooming under the freedom and stability Kaido had provided. Alara's art studio, once a forgotten dream, now flourished. Sunlight streamed through the vast windows, illuminating canvases bursting with vibrant colors, cityscapes, portraits, abstract expressions of resilience and hope. She no longer painted just for herself, but with a fierce joy, her work gaining quiet recognition within discerning art circles. The success was hers, hard-won, but fostered by the protective shadow Kaido cast over her life. The Obsidian Club, under Kaido's unwavering, legitimate leadership, had not merely survived but thrived. It had shed its old skin, becoming a hub for innovative entrepreneurs and philanthropists, its reputation now synonymous with power, yes, but also with integrity. Kaido, no longer just a shadowy magnate, had solidified his position as a respected, if formidable, figure in the city's legitimate landscape. He wore his power with a quiet confidence that Alara found both awe-inspiring and deeply attractive. Their life together was a delicate balance of light and shadow. Kaido remained Kaido, possessive, intensely private, and fiercely protective. There were still late nights, hushed calls, and the lingering sense of a vast, complex world just beyond her sight. But now she was an integral part of that world. Not a prisoner, but a partner. She witnessed his moments of quiet reflection, the subtle weariness in his eyes when the weight of his empire pressed too heavily. And he, in turn, found solace in her vibrant creativity, in the fierce light she brought into his once austere existence. One crisp autumn evening, mirroring the season of their fateful meeting, Kaido found Alara on the expansive balcony, gazing out at the city's twinkling expanse. The air was cool, carrying the scent of distant wood smoke and the promise of change. She had just finished a new painting, a vibrant depiction of a lion protecting a delicate flower, its edges softened by a profound understanding. "It's beautiful," Kaido murmured, his voice a low, intimate rumble as he stepped onto the balcony, his presence immediately grounding her. He stood behind her, his arms circling her waist, pulling her gently against his solid form. The possessiveness was still there, a strong, reassuring presence, but now it was infused with an undeniable tenderness. "It's for you," Alara whispered, leaning into his embrace. "A different kind of strength. Different kind of legacy." He turned her to face him, his obsidian eyes deep and fathomless, reflecting the city lights. There was a profound quiet in his gaze, a depth of emotion he rarely showed. "Alara," he began, his voice rough with suppressed feeling, "you walked into my fire. You refused to break. You chose me. And in doing so, you gave me a life I never knew I deserved." He reached into his jacket pocket, producing a small, velvet box. Alara's breath caught, her heart beginning a frantic flutter. This wasn't a proposal in the traditional sense. With Kaido, it was always a declaration. He opened the box. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was not a diamond, but a single, exquisitely cut sapphire pendant, deep blue as his eyes, encircled by delicate silver filigree. "This," he said, his thumb tracing the cool stone, "is for truth, for wisdom, for the depths you brought to my world. You are my partner, Alara, my equal, my sanctuary. You are mine, not as a possession to control, but as the other half of a legacy we will build. Together." His gaze, intense and unwavering, held hers. "Will you build it with me?" Tears, warm and joyful, streamed down Alara's face. This wasn't about ownership derived from debt or danger. This was about a profound, enduring love born from the crucible of chaos. He was still the dangerous magnate, the silent lion, but he was her lion. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Kaido. Always." He fastened the pendant around her neck, the cool sapphire settling against her skin, a tangible symbol of their unique, unbreakable bond. He then brought his lips to hers, the kiss slow, deep, and utterly possessive, a promise of a future forged in steel and softened by an enduring, fierce love. Below them, the city glittered, a vast, complex tapestry of light and shadow. The Obsidian Club, once a place of her despair, now stood as a testament to their transformed lives. They had broken free from old legacies, from the chains of debt and the burdens of a dark name. Together, Kaido Kageyama, the reformed magnate, and Alara, the artist whose dreams had been reborn, were writing their own story. A story of enduring love, quiet strength, and a freedom found not in absence, but in the fierce, protective embrace of a love that rewrote all the rules. Their unwritten legacy was just beginning, gleaming as bright and profound as the sapphire around her neck. Isn't it true that sometimes the chains we carry aren't made of steel, but of past hurts and unspoken fears? Alara's journey through the gilded cage reminds us that even when life forces us to surrender, our true value lies not in what we possess, but in the unwavering spirit within. And Kaido? He showed us that even the darkest hearts can find redemption, not by erasing their past, but by choosing to protect, truly protect, the light they find. Your worth is not defined by your scars. It's forged in your resilience. If this story resonated deep within your soul, affirming your strength and belief in a love that heals, please join our community. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. I choose love.